Hello everyone and welcome to the sector update for construction, building services and utilities qualifications from Pearson. My name is Gabriel Staples. I'm a sector manager for this sector. My responsibility is to ensure that qualifications and assessment services are designed that they are fit for purpose, meet market needs, fit for purpose for learners and for centres and for employers. So the agenda for today, it should be a fairly short session, around 30 minutes, really just to go up to give you a good update on the products in the sector and the reforms that are ongoing and how we're responding and how we're changing our products to meet that reform, and a particular focus at the end on apprenticeship products and apprenticeship changes. So this webinar really is primarily aimed at centres who are already delivering Pearson qualifications. There's quite a lot of detail on specific products, which won't mean much to you if you don't actually deliver them. It can also be useful if you are interested in becoming a Pearson Centre to deliver qualifications or assessment services in construction. So the range of products we will cover really is everything from the lower level BTECs to the MBQs, high nationals, BTEC nationals and BTEC firsts, and current apprenticeships and new trailblazer reformed apprenticeships. So the first section on qualifications, here we've got a list of qualifications with some notes attached to them that describes in detail some of the work we've been doing last year and we are doing. These qualifications is part of regular update work that we carry out to meet the CITB's occupational standards, the national occupational standard changes. As these changes take place, we then are duty bound to respond and update our qualifications accordingly, so they continue to meet the NOS and meet the employer needs for occupational competence in those areas. So as you can see, we've got a few that are due in red here that are due for the remainder of 2018, and several that we did by the end of last year. In particular, one update, again driven by CITB, that was the update which we made live in February, which was the changing of the BTEC Level 1 award in health and safety in a construction environment, principally with the update to 2 new criteria. But when in doing that, we also had to update our specification and the free assessment workbook, which it can be used as a vehicle for recording assessment evidence, but also to help teaching as a tool in class. We've taken the opportunity to actually improve the questions in the workbook as well. So any learners registering after the 1st of February 2018 will need to use the new version, the new spec on the page. If you go into BTEC Specialist Qualifications on our website, you'll find that qualification there with the new workbook. It's accessible via your EdXL Online username and password. Again, another specific update here is to floor covering occupations, quite a specialist NVQ, but we've had to revise it to make sure it met the current NOS, which it wasn't doing. It's a removal of a unit, and that went live on the 1st of May this year. Also, the building maintenance multi-trade, which was relaunched and updated in January, will need a further revision, and this revision is to make sure that learners who need to do the unit, which is on preparing background surfaces for plastering, tiling, etc., learners who need to do that unit more than once can actually do that. At the moment, they can't do that in the structure. The one caveat is that if you are doing that unit more than once, the credit will only be counted once, but you will need to make sure that you have assessment evidence that's specific for that activity. So you're preparing a surface for tiling rather than plastering, if that's the group that you're taking the unit in. So it won't be possible by and large to APL any of the evidence over. There's 1 or 2 exceptions where that might be possible, but majority of the unit would need to be evidenced again. So for the rest of the year, we are just doing a rolling program of making sure we extend any qualifications that are nearing their review date, assuming they've still got demand. If they're no longer used, we will withdraw them. This allows it to continue to be used in SACE apprenticeship frameworks, and also in the reformed Trailblazer apprenticeships where they specify those qualifications. We've also updated every single specification across the board in Pearson qualifications to make sure total qualification time, or TQT, is now a value that's given in the specification. That was a requirement from Ofqual. Finally, it's not mentioned here, we should also say that we are finalising the changes to the Level 7 NVQ Diploma in Construction Senior Management, which is something that we've rewritten. We've taken the occupational standards from CITB, who own them, but we've told them, and we've worked with them on the project to make some changes to the way the units are written. And this is because they were not to an acceptable standard, so we weren't able to pick up the units as they were given to us. So we've removed some of the lower level units that were proposed in the structure, and we've taken out some of the duplication in the statements in the assessment criteria. And overall, our approach is to try to encourage holistic assessment rather than the duplication that was quite often as a result of the QCF qualifications, the way they were written by CITB at the time. Assessment strategies we have updated on our website to the new assessment strategies last year and at the beginning of this year. There are specific updates for plant operations and controlling lifting operations, and also an adjustment in the main one for thermal insulation. Overall, the assessment strategy updates are to do with trying to encourage and move away from simulation, but trying to encourage far more observation of performance for MVQs as being the default option. So they've moved away from the experienced worker route, where the sort of fast track route for experienced workers. There are skills tests specifically for plant operations that they are now recommending, but they are not something that we offer ourselves. These next two slides actually are to do with new technical qualifications. These are qualifications that we had originally written to meet the DFE performance criteria, but due to changing priorities, we didn't actually submit them for the criteria. And they are for 16 to 18-year-olds primarily. And they are designed for those who need a level 2 qualification and who know what job they want to go into, for example, bricklaying, carpentry, etc. But they need a qualification to bridge their knowledge and understanding to get them up to that level, get them employable. So not only do they include the technical skill that you learn in the workshop in college, but also they include or are designed to ensure a more rounded learner comes out of the college with and is more employable. So they do have facets of employability and skills and in those qualifications built in. They've got the backing of employers and professional bodies as we've written them, and they're not yet live, but we are planning to submit them as a non-externally assessed qualification, and they will be, it's intended that they will be available from August this year. So in further detail then, there are 3 qualifications in these 3 occupational areas: carpentry, brick, painting and decorating. They are designed to introduce the construction industry in the context of that trade and activity, to get learners thinking about their own personal development, but also to develop the specific skills needed to do perform basic tasks such as bricklaying for that discipline. The assessment, which would now be internal, is an extended practical task, which is supervised and done in college or in the provider to a brief that we've specified. I'm now going to talk briefly about graded level 1 qualifications, which were starting to be used last year for the first time. These are new qualifications. So they're again designed to help bridge people, to get people up to that level 2 standard, which is usually the minimum level that you need to be occupationally competent in construction craft trades. And these are quite flexible qualifications. They have a lot of support material associated with them. They've got, with regards to checking assignments, they've got a combination of sort of personal skills as well as construction specific skills. In terms of the actual structure, you've got 3 sizes with the personal skills at the top, and then you get to choose from a range, a smaller number of sector-specific units and a larger number for the bigger size qualifications. So they are designed to be quite flexible and give you the choice so that learners get a taster in construction before they then perhaps specialise at level 2 in, for example, in a more technical qualification, as I've just described, that we're launching from August. In this slide, it's not particularly clear, but you can see the range of units available in the construction, specifically in construction. Just before I talk about BTEC National, it's probably worth mentioning that as part of the work we're doing to promote the entry and the qualifications that facilitate entry to level 2. We are also looking at developing a taster course with a free workbook, which is designed to introduce construction even smaller amounts of time to do this than an actual level 1 qualification. So if you've got learners who are probably 14 years and upwards, and they're considering going into vocational training or even a career later in construction, then we are developing free workbooks for that session. We've already developed it, or are about to finalise it for other sectors such as health and social care, and construction is the next one we want to introduce. So it's really designed to be a package of resources alongside these qualifications that help learners will help centres give advice to learners and to encourage them to think about their career options, their progression routes, and how they can achieve their goals in this specific sector. So moving on then to, as is shown on the screen at BTEC National, we've updated, you may be aware, the BTEC Nationals across the board in 2016 and 17. Specifically for construction, we launched that in 2017, although it is dual running with the current, the former QCF BTEC National, so you just still have a choice of product for this year. The dual running will continue to at least 31st of December 2019, and this is partly because we know that some centres have still stuck with the older BTEC National, for example, for reasons of continuity or lack of time to prepare to go to the new version, and also the fact that it's still recognised in SACE apprenticeship frameworks. We have put the new, wherever we can, we have put the new BTEC National in apprenticeship frameworks as dual running as well to reflect this. So some summary information on the screen here on BTEC Nationals, showing the level of support and endorsement it has from industry as a whole, and particularly in construction. We know that it does get very strong support from employers and professional bodies, particularly as a known and trusted brand to really give learners, particularly the more able learners, potential future technicians in construction and managers, to give them a more rounded curriculum in college alongside perhaps A-levels, or even instead of a whole A-level curriculum. Specifically for construction, then we have now the new versions now have specific routes for construction built environment, civil engineering as its own qualification, and building services engineering as well as its own qualification. The new design of them is compatible with the DFE tech level performance criteria, so it has to have external assessment, a large proportion of mandatory core, and the way these are designed is that you can actually do the first year. There are common units on the first year between all 3 qualifications, and then you can choose to specialise in your second year. So if a learner doesn't know when he first starts which particular discipline he wants to go into, then that is possible to specialise, to leave it as late as year 2 to do so. These are all improved on the DFE tech level performance measures, and the content has been updated to try to reflect the modern work that technicians do in the modern workplace. For example, content on building information modelling, design, surveying, as it shows on the screen there. We've also got a new focus on quantity surveying as well, which wasn't in before, and things on quality control, and becoming a bit more savvy on sort of commercial and contractual processes on site that learners may need to be familiar with. The higher nationals, I'll just talk briefly about these. These are also really designed to progress from the nationals. So the new higher nationals came in and fully replaced the old higher nationals from last year. These are in, certainly at the HNC at level 4, these are in equivalent pathways for construction, civil engineering, building services. But in addition, you've also got the surveying pathway. And then at level 5 HND, you've also got even more specialists, so the opportunity to specialise again. And also, if you're doing this as full-time, then it's possible to specialise only once you get to year 2 as well, the way these are structured. Both the, for the technician level, so 3 and 4, both the HNC and the BTEC National are recognised by professional bodies as meeting the EngTech professional entry status where appropriate, for example, in civil engineering. The other disciplines are recognised by their respective professional bodies, so Chartered Institute of Building for the construction, ICE, the civil engineers for the civil engineering, and CIBSE for the building services. These are also underpinned, they also underpin the current SACE apprenticeships, and it's intended that they will continue to underpin the new apprenticeships as they are developed. So in this next section, I'm talking briefly about the reform. I can't go into too much detail, but I will talk about some of the products we've got that meet the government's reform agenda. So as you'll probably be aware, there's been a lot of change in the last few years, really since, well, there's always change, but since 2010 in particular, when the government has reformed the approach to vocational education. The entitlement funding is certainly one route that some colleges and almost all schools are very dependent upon. So we've tried to ensure that our qualifications are designed to be on the lists and meet the performance criteria that's set by DfE wherever possible. So we have obviously BTEC First, BTEC National for the tech level measures, and in some sectors, although not construction, the technical certificate post-16 measures. Also on this slide, you'll note I've talked about the Sainsbury's Skills Plan, which was quite a significant report which has been implemented by the government, and that the effect of that is this introduction of the new T-level qualification, which is designed to sit alongside A-levels as an equivalent qualification, but it's specifically in to prepare learners for the workplace using a vocational option to replace and to sit alongside in terms of the prestige and level of equivalence of an A-level. Also here, and I'll talk about this later, is the apprenticeship trailblazer reform that's ongoing, and I'll talk about products that we've got that meet the new trailblazer standards. There's a link at the bottom here where you can see that you can sign up to Funding News, which has much more detail on the reform and the changes that impact qualifications specifically. So really focusing on the T-levels then, the idea then is to, at 16, that learners will have the opportunity to either do A-levels, continue on that route, or to go to a technical option. And it's expected that schools will be required to properly signpost and to advise learners on their options here. The technical or T-level options are going to be available in across 15 routes. For construction, it has 3 subcategories. So there is a building services engineering pathway from 2020 that's planned, on-site pathway, and a planning and surveying design pathway from 2021. Of these, what they've done is propose an occupational map with all the potential new trailblazer apprenticeships that could be met by these T-levels. We've given our feedback on that, and I know industry's had their say as well. And there are obviously some concerns, some controversial sort of mapping that we've tried to highlight. And I think of the routes, we can obviously see how the planning, surveying, design technician type route could quite easily be met by a T-level curriculum, because it does align to a lot of what we do at BTEC National currently. We don't necessarily see it's not very obvious to us how building services engineering and on-site could really stick together as a coherent qualification. If you look at the occupational maps that the government has produced, you'll see the range of qualifications and trades that are potentially in scope for these T-levels, and they are really quite varied and include license to practice things in plumbing, electrical, and so on. So we doubt that potentially that a T-level if they're not changed, then they may not have quite the credibility that the government wants. Also to note here, there's a requirement for a very substantial work placement, so 315 hours, which obviously is a great opportunity if learners can do that. But sourcing for colleges and providers to source the experience, or to engage with employers who are motivated and want to provide that level of work experience, may be tricky, particularly in construction. Before T-level, then it's also mentioned in the skills plan that there's a need for bridging provision. Now, I've talked earlier about the level 1 type of qualification offer that we've got to help people into a level 2, but there's also an example that we're working on now, a sort of live example, if you like, with the CoLab group that's being piloted, and it's supported by Build UK. And this is a program that I'll show this in the next screen, but it's a program that's mapped to current entry-level level 1 qualifications, so learners can get some early achievement of qualifications there. But it also includes a taster of the whole industry, where providers, according to their local need, can specialise in particular areas, particular craft trades. This next slide here shows the sort of program of work, so from induction through to completion. And on this you'd also get the 2 Pearson qualifications mentioned, but the idea at the end of this is that they would then be able to enter into an apprenticeship, or even directly into work, or potentially a level 2 technical qualification if they want to then specialise. But it gives enough information and understanding to the learner so that they realise there is more to construction than simply to the traditional craft trades. It gives information on the sort of the side of planning and logistics, and so even site supervision as well, and really to introduce the careers that are available in construction. So in this next section, now I will focus on specifically on apprenticeships. There's a document here that you can is available if you contact me. There is a full summary of our SACE apprenticeship offer, which is largely still fit for purpose and still active and available to centres. This has the full description of the full range of apprenticeships from bricklaying to carpentry to civil engineering operations to construction supervision. There's about 40 odd different frameworks. Most of these, the pace of change with construction apprenticeships has been so slow, most of these frameworks are still available and aren't yet closed. The one exception to this is carpentry and joinery, which is going to close in terms of the current apprenticeship, SACE apprenticeship, is going to close to new starters from the end of this year. That's agreed by exception because the group are developing, and we are working with the group to develop new endpoint assessments for that. Because the government has seen how slow the pace of change is, they didn't want to risk the shutdown of SACE apprenticeships before the new Trailblazers went live. So they've decreed that in a majority of cases, apprenticeships will still stay available until at least 2020. But in terms of the reform, then this is probably a reminder to most of you, but the comparisons to SACE and Trailblazers, the obvious differences are that there's an endpoint assessment, and before that endpoint assessment is the gateway to get there. So it's expected that providers who are contracted directly by employers now have the control to do that. They can procure their services from providers in conjunction with awarding bodies, and their responsibility of the provider is to get the learner to that endpoint assessment, where they will do for example, a test, a written test, or maybe have an interview, or summarize a portfolio, or perhaps more likely have a practical observation. The criteria for that is specified in the Trailblazer assessment plan for each standard, and that's what we work with as an awarding body to implement in our new specifications for endpoint assessment. So it's possible to procure endpoint assessment services directly from us, where we've developed them. And a critical point in the new standard is that they will have this gateway, so it's expected that learners would need to be assessed before the endpoint assessment to make sure that they are fully ready to do their tests. This will help to reduce the number of failures. So this is really what I was just discussing now with regards to the withdrawal of the SACE frameworks. That's really now been put on hold until 2020, with the exception of the construction of the carpentry and joinery. In terms of the recently launched frameworks, and there's other documents we can send you on this in more detail, but carpentry joinery has just been launched. Digital engineering technician, which that will actually use the BTEC National on program, that's been launched. Rail design, transport planning, they have been live for a year or two, and again we've got qualifications, BTECs and MVQ style qualifications that are fit for purpose to meet the on-program requirements for those. Civil and building service engineering technician, that's pretty much a like-for-like replacement, and we know that there are some going to the new standard now. And some utilities, or many utility standards, of which we only offer the smart meter installer, and that's through a contract direct to British Gas. Property maintenance operative, we don't offer the standard for that, but that's been available for some while as well. And there's a whole batch of level 4 and level 6 frameworks that are almost ready, but due to funding challenges and some queries over the assessment plan, have not quite been finally released. So there is some concern actually with the change or the rate of change being quite slow in government. We now understand that CITB is taking forward the management of that particular group to try to get them through sooner rather than later. And it's our intention as an awarded body to support the on-program learning for all the trades and the high-level frameworks that we do at the moment, wherever we can, with, for example, with MBQs, BTEC specialist qualifications where possible. And where it is appropriate for us to do so, we will develop endpoint assessment as well. Many of the new standards, you may be aware that they do actually specify, some of them actually mandate qualifications, although not many. Some of them do specify BTEC or MBQ in the on-program requirements. There's another document here that I can send you, but it's a little summary on screen, and it summarises the extent to which current qualifications and current frameworks relate to the new ones. And this document is something that is available on request. I'm happy to send that out if you email me. My contact details will be at the end of the session. But in summary, it shows where they are in development, how they relate to the new frameworks, and you'll see the extent to which current MVQs in particular can actually be used on program. There's a number of standards that either specify MVQ or where we know that MVQ would map to the competence requirements. So that enables you as a centre to sell that offer to employers as a sort of an added value offer over and above just doing employer-based training. There is a requirement for 20% off the job training in the apprenticeship anyway, which can often be met by specialist qualifications or BTEC, for example, BTEC Nationals in some of the technician standards as well. Higher Nationals, BTEC Higher Nationals are also, HNCs are also expected to be relevant and appropriate for the level 4 standards that are currently awaiting release. Of those level 4 standards, the site engineering technician is actually now signed off, but the funding was rather low for that, so it's not anticipated that they'll have much take up at this time. I've already talked about the gateway briefly, but really just to emphasise the point that if you're a provider delivering apprenticeships, it is expected, and you'll be assessed on this potentially by Ofsted, is expected that there's some great attention given to the gateway point, and it's really quite important to get this right to make sure that learners have the best possible chance of getting through their endpoint assessment. And at the point of the gateway, it's if you haven't already, that would be when you'd need to make sure you've sourced an endpoint assessment provider. really, the purpose really is to make sure that learners are fully ready for their endpoint assessment and to minimise the risk of failure. There's a couple of different models which we see in construction. We see both types actually. Direct delivery is where there's not really a provider involved, and we actually sell the endpoint assessment directly to an employer. And employers who want to and who have the capability to do so and to become almost an EPA centre with us, they will be prepared to do that. But many employers you'll see are much more willing to go down the partnership route, which would be in that they procure the apprenticeship training services from a provider, and that provider then gets them to endpoint assessment and actually works with sources from Pearson, subject to the necessary controls and independence, that sources the endpoint assessment and acts as almost an approved centre to deliver the endpoint assessment, potentially at their premises as well. As long as you've not used the same assessor that you used in the on-programme, it is possible to do this. But as per normal centre approval process, Pearson will set a specification for the endpoint assessment, set approval requirements, assessor competency requirements, and you'd go through a centre approval process, albeit to deliver an EPA rather than a qualification. You may also have been through a qual approval process to do the on-programme training as well, for example, if it involves an MVQ or a BTEC. In more detail in the partnership process, really this slide is just to show that we have gone through in some detail and developed and signed off at senior level a process to partner with providers, and that's to go to employers as a partnership to offer endpoint assessment services, well, in fact whole apprenticeship services from enrolment through to completion. If you're interested in doing this, then there is a process whereby you would complete a letter of intent or expression of interest, and then we will handle that through our sales team. And direct it in terms of our experience of working in the sector, we've now got endpoint assessments for all the major sectors really up and running. One example in utilities, for example, is working directly with British Gas, where we won a contract to deliver the endpoint assessment directly to them. That's shown at the top of this slide, and that's in across customer services and smart meter installer. In terms of the model where there is a partnership, the one example here, which is not yet live, but something that we're considering offering, is the property maintenance operative, and that you'll see in the assessment plan actually specifies a role for the provider in helping facilitate and deliver the endpoint assessment as well. So if you've got a contract with an employer to train and assess learners through an apprenticeship, they will pay you directly, but you can then enrol. Once this is live and up and running, you can enrol as an approved centre with us to do the endpoint assessment. So we would provide the spec for and the approval requirements, and provide the test itself for you to administer according to our criteria and conditions. We would obviously be responsible for doing periodic checks and audits, as we normally would with any qualification, in fact. So really that's all there is for today. My contact details, Gabriel Staples, is shown on the screen. You can go onto our website, and we've also got a dedicated subject advisor for general queries for construction. He also covers engineering, who is Evren Ali Barbar as well. Thank you for your time today, and please contact me directly if you have any further queries or wish to get any further information.